Welcome to our famous vintage room at the Guitar Center store in Hollywood. We're really thrilled you're here, and we're super excited about what we're about to do. So tonight you're in for a real treat. In celebration of Make Music Day tomorrow, which honors music making of all genres around the world, we've partnered with She Shreds magazine to bring together an incredible, and I mean incredible, group of musicians to discuss the music industry. We'll talk about the industry we love and have an honest conversation on the challenges it brings. Each of our talented panelists are artists of diverse musical backgrounds with their own unique attributes and gifts. Together they represent a powerful musician's voice that needs to be heard by the music industry today. At Guitar Center, our purpose is to put more music into the world. And to do so, it's important for us to celebrate the musicians who are driving freshness and new thinking into the industry. It's also just as important to learn from musicians, in this case, these distinguished guitarists, to hear about their own unique journeys, what drives them, what challenges them, and how we as leaders in the music business can come together with new thinking and new opportunities for the industry as a whole. You know, the music business continues to evolve. As just last week, the City of New York announced financial grants to local female musicians in an effort to support music made by and for women in a male-dominated industry. This was motivated in part by research findings by USC's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, which found that only 10% of Grammy nominees from 2013 to 2019 were female. So the importance of this dialogue today is apparent. We want to bring She Shreds and this array of impressive artists together to give rise to all voices, to celebrate music makers and encourage all those who want to play and put music in the world to do so. Let's become an industry that values and celebrates that, regardless of gender. Let's come together to inspire and empower female musicians. And now, I'd like to introduce and welcome She Shreds magazine founder, Fabi Reina, to kick off our panel, Transforming the Music Industry.
Hello. Woo-wee. Thank you all so much for being here and for the beautiful speech. My name is Fabiola Reina. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of She Shreds magazine. And I just want to acknowledge also that we've been around for 6 years and as much and that this moment and this panel in this room is a really important shift in the industry. You know, we get to speak at one of the most established entities of the guitar industry and represent musicians all around the world. So that's really awesome. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. We are on land belonging to the Tongva Native American tribe. And I also want to thank Swinomish artist Black Belt Eagle Scout for educating me and helping me become aware of the importance in acknowledging this type of information. Second of all, I'd like to say that this is a space that is safe and inviting to all musical expressions, language, identities, and abilities. There is no preconceived expectation or assumption on what talking about gear or playing guitar or being a musician looks and sounds like. She Shreds promotes the inclusivity of discussing gear in whatever expression you choose. With that said, I'd like to start inviting the amazing panelists in this room, starting with Yvette Young. Come on up. Oh, hello, yes, please sit down. Yvette Young is an artist, composer, and multi-instrumentalist, best known for her finger tapping technique and style incorporated in her band Covet. All right, yeah. Next up, we have Francesca Simone, otherwise known as Simone. Simone produces her own YouTube series called The Blue Jay Sessions, in which she collaborates with other musicians, and she's best known as the guitarist for Beyoncé and Kehlani, and is working on a solo album right now, which is awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. Next up, we have Lydia Knight, the guitarist, vocalist, and songwriter in LA-based rock band The Regrets. All right, next up we have Yuna. Come on up. Yuna is a Malaysian-American musician, songwriter, who actually started writing music at the age of 19 after playing guitar. And today she has topped billboards. She's played with so many amazing musicians and is working on her 4th album coming out July 12th. All right, Cecilia Della Peruti is a multi-instrumentalist and composer who leads her band Gothic, Tropic, and most recently just went on tour with Beck. Yeah. And now I'm gonna sit down. Okay, let's get into some realness. No, I want to ask all of you a very important question. It's about the first song you ever wrote. Think about, the moment in time, little babies. What instruments were you playing, and what was the first songwriting or guitar technique that you remember using?
Well, I started on piano, so I think my background was largely classical, and I guess I was really young. I think I started when I was 4, and I would play a lot of Romantic era, Baroque era music exclusively. And I remember I really liked Baroque music. I thought Bach was really cool because all the polyphony and all of that. So I, of course, had no idea what roles went into writing Baroque music. There's a lot of stuff going on there. It's very dense. But I remember when I was little, I think I was 9 or something, I was notating what I thought sounded like a Baroque piece.
Nice.
It kind of had Baroque vibes. So I was notating it and writing it. I was pretty proud of myself back then for doing that. But of course it wasn't legit or anything.
So you wrote on piano?
Yeah, I wrote on piano. Sorry, I should have clarified.
Nice.
Piano.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Simone, what's your story about the first song you ever wrote?
So I was inspired by Carlos Santana.
Nice.
My parents took me to see a Santana concert when I was 12 years old, or 11th. It was my birthday, and I was in the 8th row, and he just came on and played one note, and I just started bawling. I was this little kid crying, and everybody's what's wrong with you? I just love this. And so I begged my parents for a guitar for Christmas, and I got it for Christmas, and I just remember sitting on the couch on Christmas, and I just wrote this really silly, sad song, and it didn't even use I didn't even use my fingers. It was just open strings.
Perfect.
And it was just about the birds and the weather or something. I don't know, but I was just so excited that I had a guitar. So yeah.
Awesome. How about you?
Ooh, okay. I got my first guitar for, I think it was Christmas also when I was 6, or maybe it was my birthday, and it was this little, the classic Daisy Rock heart, cheetah print, really cool, really trendy guitar, and it was the coolest thing ever for me. And I wrote, now looking back, it's the creepiest song ever. I wrote this song called Sweet Lila about a baby that my guitar teacher's friend was having. She was pregnant, and her baby's name was Lila. And the whole chorus is your little fingers, your little toes, your little eyes, your little nose. It's creepy.
Yeah,
but you know what? I was 6. It was cute at the time. But if I were to write that now, people would be oh my God. So yeah, Sweet Lila.
Or it would be really amazing.
Or it could work.
I feel like it could be
I could get away with it, but maybe
amazing.
not everyone could get away with writing a song like that.
Yeah. Yuna, what's the first song you ever wrote?
For me, I think the first song I ever wrote, I was 19, a little late. I just started playing the guitar, I started learning at 14 and I gave up. Picked it up again and I gave up again, I was giving up a bunch of times. And I think when I was 19, I was in law school and I was really bored. I needed something to do to be creative. And I wrote my first song as soon as I learned how to play 3 or 4 chords. The first song that I wrote was called Deeper Conversation, and it's actually still on Spotify right now. Yeah, it ended up becoming an actual song, which is crazy. So, and that's how my management from Los Angeles like found me. I was
Wow.
this kid from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and they found that, and here I am with all of you.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And do you ever listen to that song and are like, okay, this was me?
Yeah, it's not that bad. I was like, oh, okay, like 19-year-old Yuna, so yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Cecilia?
First song I wrote, I think, I came from piano too, so I put it on my lap, and it was my mom's nylon string guitar, like classical guitar. And so that neck is just so fat and cumbersome, and the action was like that. And I played it like, how I knew the melodic information would work with a piano. And so I played it like tapping. So I started playing guitar by tapping. And so that was the first, it was like an instrumental kind of proto-prog song.
Wow.
Lost in the Abyss, it was never recorded. I remember it. I remember how to play it though.
We're basically amongst prodigies right now. So, actually, this is a great transition into my question to you, Yvette. Going back to the way that you were introduced to music and the piano techniques, and that's a pretty rigorous practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how, if at all, do you think that practice and the techniques and the intricacies of that genre have influenced you in the way that you write on guitar today?
Well, first, I guess going to the practice thing, I think the main thing I took from my classical background was having like practice discipline, because sometimes I'd have to write I'd have to sight read like 30 minutes of music and like memorize it and play it. So the way I do that is just by chunking. So it's like kind of to digest large amounts of information and like memorize it. The best way to do it is to break it up and then practice the transitions to each section. So I kind of take that with how I write. I usually when I write a riff or something, it's like really intricate and there's like many voices and harmonies going on. I'll usually kind of break it up into little sections, and I'll practice each section until it's like very fluid, and then I'll practice how to string it all together. A lot of times, Instagram and like YouTube and stuff, it's very deceptive because it makes it seem like I just like barf out these riffs, but really the process is pretty laborious. I think I sit down and play the same riff for 6 hours. Sometimes like I get up, I make coffee or something, and I just literally practice the same thing, and I try to get it fluid for the entire day, and I forget to eat, I forget to like use the bathroom. It's a really intense, laborious process. And I think the other thing that helped me with was having a good ear. Like I studied theory, but I don't really use it when I'm writing and stuff. I find that it's just is not as fluid. Usually I sing everything, and then I hear like what harmonies I want, and like I try to sound as full as I can as like one person. So I kind of think of guitar as like a piano where like the upper strings are my right hand and the lower strings are my left hand, and I can cross over sometimes. So that tapping technique that I use and the finger picking, it's all just because I want to try to sound like how I sound on a piano with like multiple voices weaving in and out.
Got it. Wow, that was awesome. I feel like if at any point you're interested in this, like I would love for them to hear what you're talking about, because it sounds so intricate and like so kind of like it's it just feels like it's such a big process, but in reality, the way that you play it, it looks so simple, and it just kind of like you're like a wave in the ocean. So it's really cool. I'm curious actually to know, because you pedals, and in that practice process, at what point do you bring pedals in? Is it better to practice with pedals, or is it better to keep pedals out and then bring them in later once you have it solid?
I love this question because I think there's multiple ways. Well, this is a horrible expression. I was going to say there's many ways to skin a cat, but I don't like that expression, so let's not skin cats.
Agreed.
Yeah, I do not endorse animal violence. Okay, anyway, I love this question because everyone approaches it differently. Like some people plug into a piece of gear and it inspires them, like they hear something, and that's like an integral part of their process. For me, I find like I'm a visual artist, so I kind of view pedals like colors, and you use them selectively in different places. I usually write a piece without any effects, even no compression, because I find practicing with compression is kind of like I don't know, it makes things sound very smooth and rounded, and it's better to have good technique and to practice so that you get great tone even without a compressor.
Right.
And you build up your finger strength so that you can sound nice and even. But usually I practice totally dry, like no effects, nothing, just direct into amp. And then after I have the song, I'll kind of like listen back, and I'm like, okay, this part, it kind of sounds like water flowing, or it sounds like kind of spacey, so I'll throw on like a chorus vibrato on it or something, or like I'll kind of decide which areas I want to color, or if it's like a particularly aggressive section, I'll slap on some overdrive or like a preamp or something to like give it an extra push.
That's awesome.
So I kind of like view it as like black and white drawing, and then I choose which parts I want to color in with effects.
Cool. I can literally visualize that. Simone, let's talk about a little bit of what you do. So I feel like you have collaborated, especially like within your YouTube series. There's a lot of collaboration there, and what I love the most about it is that R&B guitar is just like so melodic, you know. It's like of another voice. It's, you know, it's a melody, and I love the way that you kind of like pull in and out, and you know, there's like, it's kind of like this like blues style call and response type of thing. So I want to know about your experience as a studio musician and a touring player, and how you transition now from living this very intense touring life for someone else's music and going into your own identity and your own style and writing your own music today.
Well, I guess when I'm collaborating with other musicians, other artists, I always try to find what's unique about them, and I try to like mirror it with my guitar. And I love melodies, and I love like putting together like intervals to make like beautiful melodies. And so I guess when I'm playing, I'm always thinking of how to make the prettiest melodies. That's kind of like my go-to. Like I just love chords, I love melodies. So I guess in terms of playing with other artists and collaborating, like in my Blue Jay sessions, if I'm with different artists, I try to like figure out like what makes them special, and then I try to complement them, because it's kind of like every collaboration to me is like a puzzle piece, and I want to, you know, complement them in the best way that I can. And in terms of coming into my own as an artist, I feel like it's a really beautiful journey. It's like when I'm playing for other artists, it's like I have, like I said, it's like I have to figure out how to complement them the best. But while I was doing that, I feel like I kind of like lost myself within that, and I feel like I wasn't able to express myself fully in the way that I needed to. And so the past like year, I've been declining a lot of like tours and gigs and money to discover who I am. And I feel like the difference between, well, not necessarily even the difference, but the difference that I found between being like a guitarist and an artist is, as an artist, you have to really be comfortable with yourself and comfortable in your skin, and be able to express like your fears and your weaknesses and your strengths, and be open to being vulnerable about that. And I feel like I was hiding behind the guitar when I was playing for different artists. I was like, okay, this is my guitar and I'm a rock star and I'm cool, you know? But like, I wasn't allowing myself to like be completely myself, and I was afraid of a lot of things. So in the past, like, especially in the past like few months, I've really kind of like realized like, hey, it's okay to be me, you know? And I feel like that's a really cool experience to have, because I've always been hiding, I guess. So yeah, I've been starting to write from a place of like my deep soul, not to get too deep, but like I have been, and so it's like very, very therapeutic, and I'm really, really, really excited to like finally like share that with the world.
Nice.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
When you think about a melody, and when you're talking about melodies, is there a specific technique isn't the word that I'm necessarily looking for, but is there a focus that you feel like really makes a melody defines it? Is it like dynamic, or is it like, because I feel like you can make a melody out of like four notes. So what is it about a melody that people should really hone in on?
I think it's, for me, I love intervals. I love messing with like different intervals to make certain melodies. For me, I think it's always like a conversation. Like when I think of a story, when I think of a solo, I think of a story. Like what are the characters? What's the plot? And like you go from there and you kind of like have the same like motifs throughout the solo. And then I think the thing that actually really for me makes like a melody is the emotion. And like putting that emotion into it. If it's anger, then you should be able to feel that through the guitar. If it's joy, you should be able to feel that too.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Lydia.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You're so far away.
I know.
So I want to ask you about, at what point did you begin to gravitate towards the guitar? What guitars and what pedals and styles and have you experimented with, and what are you working on today?
Well, actually, precursor to my birthday and why I even asked for the guitar in the first place was I went to a Donna's concert with my dad when I was 5, and it's one of my most like vivid first memories ever, and I freaked out, and I just was like, I had always had love and this gravitation towards dancing and music and rhythms and just kind of an obsession, but I feel like a lot of young kids have that, and this was the moment, like seeing that and seeing women, like if you don't know about the Donnas, you should go and look up the Donnas. They're just this badass group of women who just make really cool music, and seeing them on a stage, that was like just something I'd never seen, just only women doing it, and I thought that was so cool, and was just instantly obsessed, and was like, oh, I need to do that, like that's gonna be me. And I mean, all of my like career day things from first grade and kindergarten are just me writing like, I need to be a singer and guitar player in a rock band, and like I've never strayed from that because I've just been obsessed ever since then. And I think a lot of credit has to go to my first teacher, who was actually I had like a visual art class that I went to after school when I was in that time period, and she also happened to play guitar and sing.
Cool.
And she was like, oh, I can teach you that too. And so then day after my birthday, I got that guitar, Daisy Rock, started lessons the next day, and never stopped. And she taught me how to write and I mean, like you can't really teach someone how to write, but she showed me a lot of tools to put in the writing toolbox, and I used that to learn how to play. And I think a big thing for me and like my journey as a guitar player, like something that I've had to get over is, especially being in a very, masculine dominated industry, is learning that like, I don't view myself as an incredible guitar player. Like I view myself more as like a songwriter and performer, and I use the guitar as my tool to do that. And it's something, like you said in the beginning when you introduced all of us, that this is a safe space for whatever that means. Like whatever, being a guitar player can mean anything that you want it to mean, and I think learning that you don't need to like be what you think is an incredible musician to be a guitar player and be a great guitar player. And I think learning to get over that, and like, I went to music school when I was younger, School of Rock, and like there were just all these dudes who were just like great at shredding, and like and that's so intimidating. And to be like, oh, well, I like write songs and use an open G chord most of the time, and like it's embarrassing, but like I don't know, that's what makes me happy. And I think getting over the fact that being a musician and being an artist is whatever you want it to be is something that I don't even remember what you asked me. I'm so sorry. I just started rambling. Oh no. Therapy session here. Anyways, so yeah, that's cool. That's
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna share a story because of based off of what you're saying. And I was like last week, I was in this room with someone with a white man who was probably 40 years older than me, and he asked me, he was like, well, shredding, doesn't that mean like wailing? And I was like, well, actually, no. Like, to me, shredding is really about emotion and evoking emotion.
Yeah, totally.
And he was like, well, then I guess that means I've been shredding all my life. And I was like, well, exactly.
Yes, you
exactly.
have. Yes.
You're a shredder, you're a guitar player, just in the same way that I am. And we actually live the exact same guitar culture, but we just haven't discussed it before, And so I think that is such a huge part of the conversation, is to just help people understand that, for the past 40 years, the guitar industry has defined what guitar playing means as something that not everyone relates to.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Thanks for saying that. And on the note of the Donnas and of visibility, and anyone can come in and say their perspective on it. But what does visibility mean to you? What impact do you feel like it has on your local and global community and your fans? And to see you on stage, and for you to be someone's role model. And I feel like that's a question that's kind of weird for me to ask, because I feel like it's actually only asked to women.
True, which is part of what's tough about it. Yeah. Yes.
And I before you answer, I just want to promote that question affects not only women but people of all identities and ages. And I encourage everyone to ask each other that, the importance of visibility. How does it affect you? And how has it grown? How has it evolved? So yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
My first thought when you ask something like that is the fact that I started because of someone's visibility and because of this group of women in a rock band being shown to me, and my dad taking me to that concert at the age of 5. That's the reason why I'm even sitting here right now. And so the fact that all of us can do that for other young people or old people, anyone, any humans out there, is so cool. And I think the fact that, like you said also, that we're sitting here and that there's people watching us talk, and that's a step up from where we've been in past years. And I think that, I think that it's really important that we call out also, if there's a lot of issues in journalism and in music journalism, obviously, and I think learning how to approach that is a really important thing, and learning how to say no to questions that don't feel okay in an interview, or, people just love to talk about the fact that it's a woman on a stage, and which is cool for it. It depends on the angle that's coming from and the angle of why that's being asked. I think when I was really young when I started touring and playing in bands and starting interviews, and I was always really confused and didn't know how to answer a question on a really insensitive question, like, how is it to be a girl and be in a band? Something like that. It's what are you talking about? I don't know anything else. I don't play with my vagina, I'm just here. I think that learning how now, if someone asked me that, I'd be next question, no, we're not gonna do this, So I think learning tools, and that's how we help each other too. It was women in the industry. It's once that person gets shut down once, I doubt they're gonna ask someone that in their next interview that day, So I think,
Thank you. Yuna, hello.
Hi.
Hi. So, I wanted to just give a little backstory about you and how I came to find you in my She Shreds life. So yeah, I've been listening to your music, and a few of the people that I work with brought you up, and one of the things, it's a learning lesson for me, which is why I want to say it. One of the things that I kind of look at the Instagram, and I was like, oh, she doesn't have a guitar with her on her Instagram page, and I dove deeper, and I found these videos of you playing your music, and I was like, this is so bomb. Like, this is so cool, because, you know, it's really promoting the whole idea of, like, you can choose to not stand on stage with a guitar and still be a guitarist. You can choose to only be shredding and, like, only be playing guitar on stage and still be a composer, you know? And to me, that really resonated with just the way that, I don't know, that music is moving forward and that choice, you know?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you specifically, because I feel like not everyone looks deeper into artists, and talking about press. How does press, you know, how do you feel do you feel like you're rightfully represented as a musician in press?
Wow. Most of the time they get it right, but sometimes, you know, like, okay, being like I guess, like, the fact that I'm a Muslim woman, you know, like from Southeast Asia, maybe that's something that's very rare. You know, you don't really meet like a Muslim girl with a hijab on and, like, you know, playing the guitar and singing. So that tends to be the, you know, like the main focus. Instead of talking about my music and my work, they want to talk about that, which is cool, you know, and then I start to talk about that. So this is like, you know, like
Exactly.
I can relate to,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
okay, I'm gonna say no to these kind of like
You answer
interviews.
it enough. It's like,
Yeah.
we've touched on this.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Exactly, and you know, and then you get like a headline like on the article saying, you know, like Muslim pop star, you know, and it sticks with you. Like, you know, that was like this interview that I did, and that was like in 2012. It's still there, you know. So whenever like people want to write about me, they dive into all my articles, and that's what they find, you know. And it's kind of it's not that it's bad, you know. That's who I am. But at the same time, like, yo, like, I'm an actual like singer-songwriter, and, you know, I make good music, and I work really hard to be where I am today, and I want to talk about that. But yeah, sometimes, you know, like, I do get like not misrepresented, but, you know, like they want to talk about something that is, number one, very personal to me, and number two, you know, like I guess it's a cool story to tell, because I know representation matters, you know. Like, I know a lot of girls out there who feel like they can't do what I do, but, you know, like, they're like me, like, oh, they're Muslim girls, but like, hey, but she plays music, I thought we can't do that, you know. So
Right.
and there's all these like things that sometimes, like, I'm torn between the two, you know. Like, I want to be known for my work, but at the same time, you know, like, I do want to inspire other girls to, you know, do well in music as well, you know. So I guess now, like, I finally like found a balance between two. Like, I've done this for like 10 years, so I know how to talk about it, you know. Like, okay, can we move on to question, you know, like topics about like my music and my career. So yeah, I think.
Can you tell me a little bit about, you mentioned how your first song that essentially became a hit, like, was written on guitar, and I'm really curious about the transition from writing a song on guitar, whatever instrument, or maybe even it's just a cappella, to it becoming like a pop song. So
Yeah.
can you sort of, as much as you can, guide me through that process?
Wow, I think when you play the guitar, like it only takes 3 chords, you know. That's like, simplicity is, you know, the best way to come up with an amazing song, you know. And I feel like that's like the recipe for like a great pop song, and you just stick to it, but at the same time, like, okay, how can I make this mine? And I think like that's the formula that I always go to, you know. Once in a while, I like to throw some complicated, like, experimental stuff, but at the end of it, I'm still gonna like, yeah, no, that's too much. Let's just, you know, let's just go back to being like, you know, like something that I feel like other people can enjoy, like, and understand completely as a whole picture more easily, you know? And I think I've always seen myself as a pop artist because I don't see myself like, I remember when I first started out, you know, and I wasn't signed to a label back home in Malaysia. But I was pretty active in the independent scene, in the, you know, indie music scene back home. And there's all these bands, and I started off playing in a band as well, but they're my band, you know, and I play the guitar. And people thought that was cool and very indie, you know, and oh, she's ours, you know, she's not meant to be for pop radio. And when that's what I wanted, you know, like I want my songs to be on the radio. I want my songs to be heard like globally, you know. And when I did that, a lot of people were just like kind of confused, like, no, she's not pop, you know, like what is she doing? Oh, she's a sellout, and all these things. But I guess like the most important thing about making music to me is like I have to constantly make great music, and it doesn't matter, like, you know, like you can play like 2 minutes of intro and then you come in with like a verse and a chorus and then you're done. Either that or just like a regular like pop song with a normal structure of like verse, chorus, verse, second chorus, and then, you know, outro. You can do that, and it's still, if it's an amazing song, and that's all that matters to me, you know what I mean? And I don't see there's like a clear transition. It's just a matter of, that's the principle that you have to have. Like, you know, like when you're doing music, that's the intention that you have to have within you, you know, and yeah.
Right. Yeah, I feel, and to just add to this a little bit, like I feel like when you think about like other people and their thoughts and how other people want you to write it, that's when it just totally goes downhill. But okay, so I'm gonna ask Yuna, this is a question I want to ask everybody, but I'm gonna start with you, Yuna. At what point in your career did you feel like this is exactly how I envisioned myself? Like I have met like a milestone for me.
Wow. At what point?
At what point?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, obviously, I didn't expect to, you know, get this far. You know, this is really cool. Like, I'm probably like the first Malaysian to ever, you know, like leave the country and coming out here and doing music, you know, and get signed and stuff like that. But I think like the moment when I knew that, oh, hell yes, this is like really happening for me, you know. I think the first time I played a concert at this college back home with my bandmates. It was my first concert, and nobody knew who I was, and I was in my little like scarf, you know, my hijab, and with my electric guitar, and the whole, like, this is like the graduation hall, right? Like full of like students, and they all just like went silent. They were like, what the hell is going on here, you know? And they didn't know what to expect because they've never seen, you know, anyone do that, because it's you know, like, it's not like a thing that you do when you're like, oh, dressing up a certain way back then. It's just kind of like weird, you know, but I just wanted to be me, and then I did that. And this is like the vision that I had as a kid when I used to like pretend. So I don't play tennis, but I have the racket just so that I can pretend I can play the guitar, you know.
That's
and
so cute.
I would listen to No Doubt and just like, you know, shred.
Yes.
So this is like when I was like 10, 11 years old. So pretending that I could play the guitar. And I was actually doing it, you know, at like 19 or 20. So that was when I thought like, okay, well, I have to do this like full on, like this music thing, like 110%, you know, give my all and let's just do it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cecilia, what's your moment where you realize like, this is I'm doing something right as a musician?
They come intermittently. But I think it was probably, well, shoot. It's been a
You only
slow
get
burn.
one.
It's been a slow burn, so I don't know. I don't know if I've felt that yet, to be honest.
Yeah, and if you haven't, then
Okay. I will say, like, and it wasn't my project, but there was like a sense of awe walking out to 70,000 people at the Ford Field in Buffalo, I think, and that was the first time I'd ever played for that many people, and that was pretty insane. And I just remember thinking I was like coherent in my thoughts while I was playing, and I was thinking, all right, I've got these butterflies, and then the next song starts, and the butterflies expired. It was like, and then I remember thinking, what? That's all I get? I only get 5 minutes of butterflies? What the fuck is this? I thought I was gonna be like buzzing the whole time. But that one moment was like, okay, this is like, when it subsided and the stage fright was gone, I was like, yeah, I can do this. So that was like probably consciously the first moment I thought that. I want to say though, back to your points about like press and reductive headlines, like creating that like marquee because they think it's a niche. That's sort of like, yeah, that's the whole. You've summed it up with thinking it's this sort of niche to first of all be a woman, then second of all be a woman of color, then third of all be a woman of color who's Muslim, and like shredding, you know. So it's like that visibility does have a direct impact, but it needs to. But I guess maybe the way it should be defined should be less reductive. It should be just 360 respectful of the artist, you know.
Right.
So I was thinking that when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, that's, yeah.
And it's so hard. I really related to what you were saying about like, you don't want them to not say anything about it. Like you want to represent, you want the representation out there. Like you want to be this woman doing it, but it's so hard finding the balance of like, what's too much? Yeah. Where's the focus constantly going? How can I like make sure that, you know, young women and I'm representing who I want to be representing and they're seeing this, but it's also not if you're a young woman seeing that and you're only seeing them talk about that, that's almost just as damaging.
Yeah, it's
it's
like casting.
It's like wait, but like their music, like, you know, I think it needs to be slipped in there. Like it needs to be somewhere, but not the headline.
Also putting like, you know how like Mindy Kaling says like, well, the writers in the room now have it changed in the last 5 years, and so when the writers are representative of the world that we see around us, that's when the stories become.
It's so much better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just important to, it's just like important to, you know, for me, I don't, you know, necessarily appreciate when people try to write a narrative for me, you know, and let me write my own story. Let me tell my own story, not the story that you want to tell to your crowd, you know. So it's important to kind of just like, I don't know, like smartly, like navigate. Yeah. So, but press is press, you know, and I appreciate them, and I know they help, you know, in a lot of ways to get your career forward. But just that part, you know, like you, as an artist, I feel like you have to really be like smart about it and try to like navigate.
And it's hard to learn. It's really hard to learn how to navigate that. Like, how do you know when you first start that like how to talk about that? I don't know. I feel like learning that's really difficult and something that I feel like we're all probably still figuring out somewhat. I don't know.
Definitely, yeah. To just add to what Cecilia you said, like for sure, the more that the people representative of the way that I look and the life that I've lived are asking the questions and are behind the camera, it's totally going to change. You know, I mean, it's going to be, they're going to understand that that is being human. It's not being a queer Mexican woman guitarist. It's just being a guitarist, you know, because that's the life that they live too. Anyway, so let's go back to the moment in which Yvette, you felt like you were heading in, you were doing what you loved, and you were in that moment.
I think, well, I'm constantly work in progress. Like who I am, my identity, like what I want to do is in flux, and it's okay for that to be in flux because I think we all grow and change as people, and we get new experiences, and we realize we want different things out of life, like as we live our lives. First of all, I guess to start out answering your question, I think one thing I always think about is like intention and like what I want to do with art and what I want to do with music. Like I never imagined I would be doing any of this. Like I never had like a musician dream or anything. Sometimes I actually feel deep guilt for that because I studied fine art and painting in college and education, so I thought I would be going into the field of being an art teacher. And I started out doing that. I had no idea that I would ever be playing or touring or like doing any of this. I would never imagine being on stage with all these amazing people. Like for me, it's like if you had told me that, I would have just laughed and been like, sure, for sure. Awesome. So every day feels like I'm like just really grateful. Sometimes I have to like pinch myself and be like, is this really happening? And I think, I don't know, for me, success feels like when I don't lose sight of that. When I realize that, you know, I am doing something I really love to do, and I'm like genuinely passionate about music. For me, it's like a mode of self-expression, and it's a way for me to empower myself. Like I taught myself guitar when I was, actually, your story, Yuna, about writing a song in the hospital. I was in the hospital when I taught myself guitar. I was struggling with an eating disorder, and I basically was like super depressed, and I didn't have an outlet, so I got an acoustic guitar and I started like writing songs that were like really depressing songs, but you know,
and probably really good.
They're not radio hits. But yeah, you know, like I did it because I felt like music is like a form of therapy. It's a way to teaching yourself a new skill. It can be any skill. It can be welding. It can be like making gimp suits or something. Like I don't know, like just random skills. Like doing anything. Like it's so empowering to like start from zero and like build a skill. Yeah. It's like magic almost. So that's what guitar felt like to me. I just listened to music and I like tried to learn it by ear, and then I was like, wait a minute, I can do that, and like I started writing. So for me, it's like I want to always remain grateful. I have that, and no matter what people tell me, no matter which direction people want to pull me, I never want to lose sight that that's like why I do music, because it's something I genuinely enjoy. It makes me feel really powerful. It gives me all the control, and I think it's like a wonderful, healthy outlet for people going through something really difficult. Yeah. Any form of art. Yeah, totally. So there's that, and I think success for me is synchronicity between what I am putting out and who I want to be, like what vision I have for myself, what I want my voice to be. Yeah. And it's really easy to be pulled apart in like many directions by people, and like when you get a taste of success, it's so easy to fixate on that. Totally. And it's so easy to become really deeply unhappy because you're not meeting the weird arbitrary milestones other people have set for you, or even social media, like you see what everyone else is doing. It's so hard to like not compare yourself. Yeah. And I come from a background of competitions because I did the whole piano competition thing, and I hated it. So one thing I always promised myself was I just never want to compare myself to anyone else. I don't think that's a healthy attitude. Yeah. I think it takes the enjoyment out of creation. Yeah. So I think for me, I always just want to be appreciative of what I have in this moment, and just be organic and true and genuine to myself and like what I want to do with my art. And if people like it, then that's terrific. But if they don't, also I enjoy it. So like in that way I'm kind of invincible because no one can take that joy away from me, you know?
Totally.
So I think that's, I don't know, sorry for the long answer.
Dang, that was wow. That was cool. I'm low-key tearing up. Simone, tell me all about it. No, but honestly, like Simone, I mean, like literally, we can see you on Netflix, like on the Beyoncé Coachella stage, like, and it's like, we are learning though right now that that's not the only thing that qualifies success. And I think, but it can be too. So, from your point of view, experiencing that, but also, like you said, you're growing with your art, you're growing with your tool. What has been the moment where you have felt like I'm doing something right?
Truthfully, I think the first moment where I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Well, okay, there were a lot of moments, but the one that like I think was like a turning point was actually like 2 weeks ago. I was like sitting on my couch and I was just like writing about like all the shit I've been through. I'm gonna start crying. Please don't let me cry. I'm gonna not talk about this. But like I just started writing about like I started actually like writing in my journal about like all the stuff that I've just been pushing down for like a lot of years, and like being able to like actually go back and write about it and be like, yo, this happened to me, and I'm like staring it straight in the face, and like I'm terrified of it, and I think I was actually terrified of feeling those feelings again, but when I finally did that, I was like, yo, I'm actually, like, this is what made me who I am now. And so I think like I've done some incredible things, and like, being on stage in front of like thousands and thousands of people, and I've learned so much from those experiences, and I don't regret them, or I like that's part of like me, and I feel like I'm like super grateful for those experiences. But at the same time, I feel like I'm finally like coming into like myself, and I can finally like look at myself in the mirror and be like, yo, like I'm really cool. Like these experiences, like I know that sounds weird, but like and I feel like it's like this self-love like journey, and like I feel like it sounds kind of crazy, but even when I was like this bad-ass rock star on stage in front of these thousands of people, I was really insecure, and I was dealing with like a lot of shit that like I didn't feel like a rock star, and so I feel like I'm stepping away from that kind of role that I feel like I was like put in. I feel like I can like really, it's empowering to be able to have the freedom to express myself in this way. And I think when I go back to being this rock star, it's gonna feel more powerful because I've like faced myself.
You just made me think of something. I don't know, I'm just gonna ask it because I can. Okay. Because you're talking about how being vulnerable and writing your own music is basically just like, and being able to do that from being this very like solo guitar touring studio musician. Do you think that in some way that kind of studio mentality and thinking more with your fingers than with your heart suppresses emotions?
Definitely. I came from a classical background as well. And I started playing classical when I was 3. And then I started playing guitar, and when I started playing guitar, my mom said, no books, don't read music at all. She's like, I want you to learn it by ear. And I'm like, that's weird, but okay. And that was like the best thing she could have done for me, because then I really played guitar like from the soul. And I feel like, and then I started playing jazz a lot, and jazz actually like took away all my soul, and I think that's where a lot of my fear stems from, because when I was in these jazz environments, a lot of these, it was a very masculine environment, and I feel like I had to play a certain way. I had to like play super fast, and I had to play like all the changes, and it was like really intense. And if you don't get the changes right, you suck. And you're a girl, and you're of color, like you suck. You know what I'm saying? And so I felt like I was in I just felt like I had to like be this perfect player, and it kind of like sucked the soul out of me, to be honest. And while I'm really glad that I had those experiences and taught me a lot of theory, and I understand music really, really well, that's why I kind of made this transition to go back to pop, because I kind of wanted to put that like soul back into my music and my playing. And so I feel like it's actually really interesting, because as I'm starting to sing as well, I started singing from a very technical place, because I was like, okay, everybody sees me as this like incredible guitarist. I gotta sing, I gotta match up to that, you know? And so when I started taking lessons, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, and my technique's fine, whatever, but like it really wasn't until like 2 weeks ago, like, you know, that kind of moment where I realized like none of this technique shit matters. Like it's really about like telling my story in the most like raw way for me, and like having that come through is what is gonna make me sound good, because like I was doing everything right, but it wasn't soulful. And I think like that's why I started playing guitar. So that's what I kind of realized.
Nice, thanks. Lydia, what was your moment where you felt like you were going down the right path?
I definitely agree that it's been like an intermittent, like there are, I don't know, I don't like to view it as one particular, I don't have a specific event in my head as like, that was it, because if I set myself up to view something as being it, I feel like that's setting this sort of like ceiling for myself, which I never want to do. Like, but there are definitely moments that are just make everything feel really worth it and feel really good. And when I feel best, I think the best like emotional kind of, I don't even, thrill or like any sort of reward that the most rewarding thing for me is after playing a show and like talking to someone who was at our show about how one of our songs has helped them get through, and like having them tell me a really personal story. We've had a lot of just, I mean, I specifically, I can't think of one specific time that was just a really emotional night and thing for me. There was this woman in DC, and it was around right after the Trump stuff was happening, and they had recently, they were, I want to say like late 40s, and had just recently decided to transition into being a woman, and came up after the show, and a lot of our crowd is younger, and so already seeing this older woman there was cool, and we talked for a long time, and she told me this whole story about how one of our songs, like specifically this one song, is what she listened to throughout like her transition and dealing with like a separation in her marriage, and like all just like the craziest story, and that the feeling that I felt for her, and the fact that a song that I sat in my room and just wrote to help to be vulnerable, and like you were saying, just look everything that I was feeling and that I was so scared of in the face, like the fact that those emotions and those fears in turn helped this person out after they're, you know, living, it's just, there's so much going on in the world. I don't know, it was just a whole cluster fuck of incredible feelings, and like that is something that I think about a lot, and there's nothing better than that. Like that is the most rewarding thing ever, and I think watching it be a full circle, because I try to write from a super vulnerable and honest place, because I write a lot of music just for myself and as like therapy, and having that turn into someone else's therapy is like, it's mind-blowing. Like it's crazy that music can do that for people, because it's done, so many artists have done that for me, and so that's when I feel like okay.
So we like to just, you know, kind of write about cultural, social, political things, and with the perspective of guitarists, because I feel like music can make people understand things. And sometimes we we get asked like, why are you writing about politics? It's guitar, but I feel like music, it all has to do with each other, and you. Exactly. I mean, it's a documentation of, it's part of documenting history, like we're documenting the way that us humans right now live and and politically, culturally, exactly. So, no, it's cool that you
sort
brought
of
that
a
up.
machine for empathy in that way.
Yeah. Cecilia, I want to ask you about your process, like being in Gothic Tropic, and also sort of like you just got off of this tour, and I want to ask you about making mistakes, like about that. I feel like it's one of those things that people are freaked out about. They're freaked out, and it kind of actually holds people back from writing their own music. Like going and auditioning for things. What is your advice on making mistakes, on saying on something that's wrong or right?
Well, you guys saw my demo. I had to start over. I was like, no, fuck that. I hate it. Start over. But like, really living in your mistakes, obviously telling you didn't see it, but I'm telling you now I made a mistake. And like that being like part of what makes communicating through music so important and so valuable is because when I was learning how to play guitar and learning how to play piano, whatever it is, especially children, they hate making mistakes. It drives them crazy.
That's
because
so true.
they're taught, well, everyone strives for perfection, and then you think there's something wrong with you if you hit a wrong note. And the first thing I say is like, don't be afraid to hit the wrong notes, because then you find where that note is. You remember where that is, and then using your ear, you go up half a step, and that's the one that you meant to that's kind of what I did earlier before. So, because when like you play intuitively, like I love the mistakes, and especially like one of my favorite guitarists, Jimi Hendrix, or like even, okay, I'm gonna say like Tom Verlaine. One of my favorite bands of all time, television. Everyone talks about Richard Lloyd. Richard Lloyd's like the guy. And then, but Tom Verlaine is the guy who has the weird, like, bizarre frenetic parts that one can't even try to notate. And I guarantee you half of it was just mistakes that sounded really cool. So if you're developing your style and your voice, and especially like how your mom like coached you to do that, that's so clever, because that's where that's kind of how I play guitar too. I'm like a top line solo. I'm chord averse, and I'm singing. So in my head, I actually sometimes mistakenly start singing while I'm playing the thing, and that's where I feel like mistakes are most welcome. And I think like embracing mistakes just make you a better player, better whatever it is. And especially right now, in any creative field, there's a little bit more of a safety net with everybody working through their kinks publicly. For some reason, feels a lot nicer right now, so. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Cool. I think we only have time for one more question, right? Cool. So I'm going to ask you first, Cecilia, but so, I struggle with what I have, She Shreds, and then how to not put everyone that I involve in this corner, this woman guitarist corner, because ultimately I want to push the conversation forward for equality, right? Yeah. And so I feel like as powerful as this conversation is and group of panelists and the people that we all get to work with, I think it's important to ensure that the responsibility of educating the world doesn't solely fall on our laps as women and women of color and et cetera. So, I feel like this means asking difficult questions and listening to us and what we need. So I'll start with you, Cecilia, but how can the media and brands like She Shreds and Guitar Center and organizations like the Grammys and government entities, like what do you feel like they can do to ensure that this type of inclusion and change become a permanent practice rather than some kind of marketing trend or something that, is just part of making a profit?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of, you notice how like a lot of business gets done in social settings, like just conversation. And like I've noticed in my life, you don't believe me, do you? That always happens in my head when you're having conversations, especially in the music industry. And when you're starting out, and maybe you're not publicly vetted, but you don't have all these credentials, you don't, whatever it is, you need like a famous cosign or whatever it is. Before that happens, it just needs to be like, just believe me, because I guarantee you, like all the guys who like were in bands when I was 17, like I was in a band too, but this was a scene like in the Valley. I grew up in the Valley, and it was like a lot of like hardcore prog guys, and nobody believed me. Nobody believed me for years and years. Then they see something, slide on in, and they're like, "Oh, looks like you're doing great." Yeah. Well, I don't remember how. Yeah, did not forget how you socially bullied me for the last like 7 years. So first of all, like in social settings, like even in politics and whatever it is, like just believe us, number one. And then also, your origin story here with She Shreds is so beautiful, and if you want to branch out and include other voices, mm-hmm. that is fantastic, because that's just like evidence that it is progressing. Mm-hmm. And I notice that I appreciate when men say the things that I'm thinking too on their own accord. I think you don't have to be. You could be a little brave and say, speak on our behalf, and I'm cool with that, because as long as it's correct. And I appreciate that. I think that's great, and I think anybody can be a little brave and say something that they might think that it isn't their place or voice, but obviously we know it's not your voice. You're not a lady, or whoever it is, and I wonder, like, that's how we can all be allies and show up for each other in those different ways, and I think you can do that when you read and listen and learn and learn the history and why it's so important to be an ally, and then you can start doing that without too much nervousness, and however you want to progress this project. Like, I 100% back whatever you're thinking, because that sounds fun to me.
Thank you.
And then we always have the origin to look back on and be like, wasn't it cool that?
We were talking about this earlier, and I feel like every time, like when I'm here, I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's time to do something with not just women guitar players, but then as soon as I go on tour, I'm like, I take that back. it's still really crazy out there.
Yeah. It's like in Ireland, it's like you guys are stuck in the Middle Ages, bro. You said what?
Yeah. You know,
It's insane.
and so I don't know that I'll see it in my lifetime, but I think that as long as these conversations continue and they don't fade and they don't get lost in history, then, you know, it continues. I feel like, you know, it will progress and it'll get better. Yuna, what do you feel like other entities in the music industry, you know, could make changes into placing this kind of inclusion as permanent? So what do you feel like other entities, other organizations, other media can do to ensure that this inclusion of women of color, etc., is permanent?
Wow, I think just keep having that conversation, and also, I don't know, like now, you know, sometimes like I feel like I have that responsibility. I don't know, maybe because I just got married and then, you know, I'm at this age where I'm just like very motherly and like caring. I don't know what it is, but for example, like I'm putting out this album, right? And it's called Rouge, red. So I don't know, like for me that's like the color of you know, like a passionate woman who's like brave and like angry, and you know, like on this album, like I want to say whatever I want to say. And I was having this conversation with my husband, you know, like because we're going on tour, and I was like, you know, there's something that I really, really want to do with this album, because this is me, like, you know, getting that message across, like I'm this woman now that, you know, I'm proud of it, and I want to, you know, like I want to be really supportive of like my fellow women, you know, like musicians or whatever, you know, like creatives. And I feel like I want to have like an all-girl band. Wouldn't that be cool? And that was just, you know, I was like talking about it. And now, guys, I'm going on tour, and I have a dope like bass player who's an amazing girl, and a drummer who's also a girl, and a girl keyboard player. And I haven't, you know, this is like my Beyoncé dream. It's like happening. It's insane. So, and I feel like my decision to do that also has a lot to do with the fact that I'm so far away from home. You know, like girls in Malaysia can, you know, it's hard for them to even like see this. Like they don't see themselves like being out in the world and playing music, and especially like for them, they're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna, I don't know, go to college and get married and settle down and have kids, and that's fine too. But if you want to take that step and be, you know, out there and make music and be creative and be, you know, whoever you want to be. And for me, like what I'm excited about this is bringing this whole girl band back home in to Malaysia, which I'm going to do. And show them. I'm so excited. And it's, you know, so yeah, so they can finally, you know, they can see with their own eyes, like, oh my God, like they're all girls. Like, and I remember when I was like, when I first started out playing the guitar and like singing, you know, and I learned how to play the guitar with a few of my friends who were guys, and you know, and this guy that I was like practicing with, and I was like, hey, like, okay, teach me that song, which happens to be the solo part of Hotel California, the acoustic version. So I learned how to do that from him, and then I said like, hey, so I'm gonna like perform this at my this dinner thing, like this event at my college, and he's like, yeah, right. What? You know, so I'm like, why not? You know, he's like, no, please don't do it. Like, because, you know, he didn't believe in me, right? And I'm your friend, you're supposed to be supportive. But I did it anyways, you know, it wasn't perfect, but I did it, you know? And that was like one of my first performances, like with a guitar. And it's the same thing, like me having my first concert, and this is like years later, a guy from another band who was, you know, like he became a friend after that. He's like, you know, I remember watching you perform for the very first time, and it was just so wrong. I was like, this is wrong. Like, but why? He's like, I just couldn't understand it. But now, like, seeing you doing all these things, like, hey, you know, like, now that I finally, like, get to be on TV, like, performing live and singing and not, you know, like, making any mistakes now, you know, like, I'm an actual artist now. He's like, I guess, you know, I was wrong about you. So it's just important for us, like, to get that message out there and, like, you know, and get the conversation going. I think, like, we all have that responsibility, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you brought up a good point that I haven't thought of, at least not today, is that we sort of take this idea of women playing music for granted here in the US because we see it so much now. But if you go to other countries, it is so amazing for other people. It's something that literally other people don't ever see or have never seen in their life. You know, it's just simply not an option. So I think that's something to definitely cherish while we have the privilege to cherish it. And also hiring women is awesome because then, you know, it's a job. You know, it's a career move for other women. So cool. Lydia, how about what do you have to say about this topic?
I mean, I feel like you guys covered it so well. I think something that came to mind, I don't know where exactly from, but you know, you were asking ways that She Shreds or other sort of publications or just industry things can expand or how to keep it just not as a, you know, trendy kind of thing. I think that something that isn't as common anywhere, or at least isn't as represented as, is women who aren't on the stage and women tour managers, women sound people, women, all the people in the industry who aren't on camera and aren't on the stage, like I said. And I feel like, I don't know if, does She Shreds do any sort of interviews with?
Yeah, we do.
That's so
with
cool.
Builders and
That's so cool. I think that if more people talked about that side of it, I mean, the percentage, I wish I remembered the exact number, but I read an article about the percentage of women producers out there and women in music school learning about production and learning how, you know, to do that side of it. It's so rare because it's something that's so intimidating and that the field is so, you just don't see it. And it's easier nowadays, thank God, for women to see other women on stage and be inspired by that, which is incredible. But there's a whole other side of this male-dominated industry that I feel like the more that we can empower and offer lessons and make sure that, you know, if you go to MI, you're not in a room with, you know, one woman and then a 20 to 40 dudes. Like, that's so scary. Like, how do you step into that, you know? And I think there are so many resources that don't exist yet and hopefully start to exist to allow women to not be as intimidated to enter that field of it.
Cool. That's a good point. Simone?
Can you say the question one more time?
Of course, yes. So how can other entities, media, brands, organizations, what can they do to make sure that this conversation and this inclusivity is permanent? It's something that continues over years rather than a marketing trend.
Well, I think that, like you guys said, like, it has to come from, it can't just be like the faces on stage. It can't just be like the people that you see, like one person here, one person here. I think it has to infiltrate from the bottom up as well. And like you said, like writers and people in doing the hiring. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's
totally.
like I was exactly. Like, I feel like that's where it starts. And I was actually having a conversation with my boyfriend the other day about Elon Musk, because I'm obsessed with Elon Musk. I think he's so awesome, like what he's trying to do with just like furthering humanity and the environment and everything. But we were talking about how like his company has been accused of like not hiring like women or people of color. And I was like thinking about it, I'm like, Elon Musk, like, I don't know, I can't see him like being like racist or sexist. Like I feel like if anything, it's like he has this agenda and he's trying to get the best people for the job, but maybe it's the fact that there like really aren't those people that are of color that are represented. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's because like it's really hard to get in the rooms, it's really hard to get the education. So I feel like TBH, it stems from like education. And I feel like education and opportunities. Like I feel like it's so important to give kids opportunities to be in music, to give them lessons, to be in science, to women, you know, girls, to be in science and give those opportunities, because if you're told from a young age, yo, girls don't do this, then it's like, oh, well, this is, I don't know anything else, okay, I guess I don't do this, you know. But if you are given that opportunity and that kid, that girl, whatever, loves it, then it's like, okay, she can dive into it and then grow into, you know, and then be in those rooms and be knowledgeable about the subjects that she loves. And so I feel like a lot of it, from like how I've thought about it, stems from like education and opportunities that may not have been given to a lot of young people.
Yeah, and to that, I feel like those opportunities are being presented like now. Yeah. Like when we are the older generation, I really think that people our age are going to have a totally different life experience. Yeah, I hope so. You know, just by us being aware of it and having this conversation and having, you know, a live stream and all of us listening. Cool. Yvette, what are your thoughts on permanent change rather than marketing trend?
I'm optimistic about it. Like you said, I think with this generation, it's going to get a lot better, just because I think part of the problem, at least I've observed like on tour, is just like, I guess, having enough representation and visibility. For me, I'm kind of in like a male-dominated genre, like the more technical aspect of things. I feel like it's definitely a sausage fest sometimes on tour. I actually, like on most of the tours, I've been like the only girl on these like tour packages, and it's been kind of crazy making. Yeah. And I get comments like, well, I walked into the room and I saw who was playing, and I was really surprised. I didn't expect that. I was like, why? Like, why were you surprised? Like, do you want to unpack that? Like, you know. So I think like it's weird because they make comments like that thinking it's a compliment, but it's like a weird backhanded compliment. Like, well, you're a woman, so I didn't think you could do more than 2 diddly notes. Like, you know. But like, you know. So I think it's cool. I think as much as I do this for myself, an added bonus is I get to be up there and play a genre of music that isn't largely popular with girls. And I've had girls come up to me at shows and say like, oh my gosh, like the way I write is really inspired by you, and I'm gonna go home and try to do the style that you do. And I think like, yeah, the more iterations of that, like it's just gonna die out. People aren't gonna be so surprised that it's a woman up there. I think even having any sort of preconception about like what women should do in music, like is kind of shitty. Like I think people should make the art they want to make, and nobody should have like to categorize and like put someone in a box just based on their gender, based on their race, based on whatever. Like even being Asian, a lot of people say like, oh, I didn't expect like a Chinese person to like be playing this kind of music and stuff. And I think it's cool to have like different backgrounds that people do that. I think what you said earlier about like this is a safe space with like no prejudices, no biases, I think that's really important. Definitely I feel like a lot of girls feel scared to ask questions just because there's like a preconception that like we don't know anything in the genre, and then like elitism and stuff like that. So I think it's also important to make it very like not make people feel ashamed that they don't know something. Like everyone starts from zero. Everyone knows nothing, and then you learn just by asking questions and by trial and error and making mistakes, and it's all really important, and it's all a part of the process. And the last thing I wanted to say is I think like having a separate category for women is great, but sometimes it can come across as patronizing. Like I always see like articles like best women guitarists. It's like,
definitely.
what about just like best musician?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, good music is good music, and
Right.
you're who you are, what you look like, that doesn't matter. Like close your eyes and just listen, and if you feel something, then that's great. You know, it shouldn't be a separate thing.
And even in the best women guitarists, it's all one genre too. You know,
It's all like shred.
it's really, you know, so yeah, I think that exactly what everyone just kind of really like hit it. You know, it's like having this mentality that hiring people, like education, starting from like the bottom, but also starting from the top at the executive level, like listening, believing in. You know, like those are things that really matter, and I do want to take the time before we wrap up to thank Guitar Center for having us and having this conversation here. It's a really important conversation to have, and for letting us be really real up here and listening to us. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for being here and listening, and all of you for participating.
Thank you.
Yay!